Kick off tonight's council meeting. Firstly, I'd like to welcome everyone in the gallery and the press to the council meeting tonight and remind you that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed to council's Facebook and YouTube pages. I'd ask everyone to please turn all mobile phones to silent mode. Please be aware that a hearing loop is available in the council chamber. Staff members are also able to assist you with this at any time during the meeting. Please remain quiet in the gallery so that everyone can hear the meeting. Anyone disrupting the meeting may be asked to leave. I would also like to remind members of the public watching the live stream that a copy of the agenda and information explaining council meetings can be found on the council website. Tonight you will see that we have 11 reports in open council and 3 in closed council, a transparency rate of 79%. We'll now move to reading of the prayer, so I'll ask you to please all stand as I call upon Pastor Philip Kaiser of Turning Point Church, Cranbourne, to read the prayer.
Let us pray. Father, as this meeting is about to start, we want to stop to acknowledge that you're a great God, that you provided for us. You've given us a great country, a great state, and great city. And so tonight, as all these areas are deliberated, may your Holy Spirit give wisdom and courage to make decisions that are going to benefit not only this generation, but the generations to come. In Jesus' name we would pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Phil. I would like you to remain standing as I call upon Ms Hayat Dugan from the Casey Multi-Faith Network to read the faith statement.
Hello everyone. The Casey Multi-Faith Network exists to promote peace, harmony and understanding, and to do so in partnership with Casey Council and the wider Casey community. We aim to spread knowledge and clarity about what different religions or worldviews believe, teach and practice. We believe that all members of religions and faiths have the right to peacefully practice and celebrate their own religion in a shared attitude of friendly coexistence and cooperation with all other people. Gracious God, we ask you to give your blessing to this council, guiding us to so that the decisions we make might truly be for the well-being of the people of the city of Casey. Thank you.
Thank you, Hayat, and I would ask everyone please be seated. The City of Casey acknowledges we own the traditional land of the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people, and we pay our respects to their elders past and present. I move on to apologies. Are there any apologies for this evening? I do have an apology from Councillor Miller-Gillich, who has asked for a leave of council for tonight's meeting, so I move. Any other apologies? I'd like to move that a leave of council be granted to Councillor Miller-Gillich. I move that, seconded by Councillor Cristani. Is there any dissent on that? Then that is carried. Are there any other apologies? Not tonight. Thank you. Suspension of local law. I'd like to move that we move into suspension of local law. Have I got a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Stapleton. Is there any dissent on that? We move into local law until I reapply local law. Firstly, tonight, as you know, we have many terrific people in our community, and I'd like to talk about Olivia Papanastayou for her outstanding achievements in raising $4,457.75 in funds for the Royal Children's Hospital. And I'd just like to read a little bit about her before we get her out the front as well. Olivia is in grade 6 at Mary MacKillop Primary School, so a great effort for a very young leader. Olivia took it upon herself to create an array rainbow badges and rainbow slinkies to sell in order to raise money for the Royal Children's Hospital. Olivia felt passionate about raising money for the Royal Children's Hospital as they had cared for her mother when she was a child. Olivia attended Youth Services Student Leaders Reception on 22nd of March 2018 and made a speech on that evening to a crowd of over 300 people about the reasons why she wanted to raise these funds. Olivia was able to sell all of her stock and raised the $4,457.75. Council would like to acknowledge this outstanding achievement as a young person from the city of Casey, and I ask you all to give her a round of applause. Thank you very much. Come forward and we'll give her a certificate of recognition for outstanding work. If you come around the back, please, Olivia. We do have another special award tonight to Jo Smale, who is a staff member of the City of Casey, for her outstanding community service to the residents of the City of Casey as Manager of Connected Communities, as she is leaving our organisation and will leave a huge hole that we will try to fill, but it won't be an easy task. Tonight marks Jo Smale's final council meeting, with Jo soon to move on to the City of Darebin to lead their child, youth and family services. Obviously they headhunted her from us because of her good work. Jo has worked for the City of Casey for over 8 years and the majority of this time leading Council's community care service. And in 2016, taking on the wider portfolio of connected communities, including emergency management, Aboriginal engagement and inclusion and wellbeing. At the core of Jo's work has been her focus on improving outcomes for the most vulnerable in our community. Among her many achievements, Jo will be remembered fondly for her leadership of the Aboriginal Gathering Place, which set the benchmark for gathering places in Victoria. On behalf of councillors, I'd like to thank Jo for her service to the community, and we wish her all the very best in the future. And because she's done such an unbelievable job as part of our team ongoing, there isn't any councillor here who hasn't sat with Jo to get advice in some form or another. I'd like all councillors to come out as we present. I've got a certificate, and Councillor Stapleton would like to say a few words before we move. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and to Ms Smale, I would just like to congratulate you on your current decision to move to Darebin, but to say how much you will be missed. Jo is an extraordinary individual who's worked under great people like Greg Wood and now Mr Coldham, doing great work to help people with the most vulnerable in our community. I've seen firsthand what Jo's done for our aged community. They're very vulnerable in a lot of ways, and also people with a disability and their carers. Jo has turned a ship around with support of her wonderful team under Steve Coldham, but turned a ship around to being one of the most outstanding departments in the southeast and certainly in Victoria. And I only found out today because I missed the email that Jo is leaving, and I'm just absolutely devastated to lose you, Jo, but I know how fortunate Darebin will be to have you. So could I personally say thank you, and I know that my fellow councillors share in that, and we wish you all the very best, and thanks for making such a difference in Casey.
Could I ask all councillors to come over to the flags, and Jo, of course. Thank you. Thanks, Jo, and all the best. And I think Councillor Smith, you want to say a few words?
Yeah, look, I just wanted to rise to reiterate what Councillor Stapleton did. You know, we will certainly miss Jo, and I want to thank her on behalf of the vulnerable communities that she has represented and advocated for. Sometimes in secret, we've had lots of little meetings and discussions and things that we've been able to work on, and it's been a real privilege to know that community or different communities in that position, in vulnerable positions, had you as an advocate, and that was fantastic. So the Republic of Darebin has picked up a good staff member. So I know she's going to be closer to home, so that's a big advantage for her. And as someone who commutes every day, I know what it's like. So well done, Jo. We will miss you. Thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you, Councillor Smith and Councillor Rosario.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can't let it go past without mentioning Joe's support for Casey Multi-Faith Network. Her and her team have done some outstanding work since taking on that portfolio, and the partnership between that organisation as well as our council is stronger than ever because of people just like Joe who work really hard to build those bridges. So well done, Joe. We'll really miss you over here.
Thank you, Councillor Rosario. Councillor Cristani.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to echo my colleagues' sentiments. And Joe, thank you very much for the work you did on the Aboriginal gathering place. It's probably Joe's primary work, I think. You were one of the primary key people in that project. It was a huge project, and we will keep the baton going on that, Joe. I promise you that. I'll do my best. Okay. Thank you very much for your work, and all the best.
Thank you, Councillor Cristani. And now I determine local law be reapplied. Oh, sorry. Sam, I didn't see your finger. We'll come back over to you. Councillor Aziz, my apologies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I rise to congratulate Joe, and one of the great things I've observed about Joe is her outstanding customer service skills and her promptness and her tendency at all times to ensure that the loop is closed on any issue that is referred. And believe me, Mr. Mayor, the residents really, really appreciated this, and so did the many community organisations that I've referred to her over the years. I have dobbed you in a couple of times, Joe, as an example of outstanding customer service. In fact, one of the key motivators for adopting the customer service strategy about 4 years ago, Mr. Mayor, was the attitude that I used to see from Joe and her department. So it'll be a huge loss to us to see you go. And I just want to wish you all the best in your career, not just for this opportunity, but for everything else you do in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Aziz. I'm looking.
You want to go? And I'll go.
Councillor Flurry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to congratulate Joe as a new councillor for about the last 15 months. I've had a lot of dealings with Joe over the last 12 months with the Aboriginal gathering place, and whenever I've needed anything, I've gone to Joe, and she's been very helpful with all the information brought to me. And also, the most important thing I'm going to miss from Jo is her smile. Every time you walk into a room, she lights up the room, and her smile is something to always look forward to. And as I said, if you can leave a smile behind, Casey will be a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flannery. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and want to raise to congratulate Jo, and it's a big loss for the city of Casey. Mr. Mayor, something that I've noticed absolutely about Jo and about many of the staff here, but something that I think Jo does very, very well is her passion. You can't buy passion, you can't fake passion, and Jo has an immense amount of passion for what she's done for the city of Casey, and for that I know us and the entire city of Casey residents are forever grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Saray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to say thank you for your service at the City of Casey. You will be sorely missed. And congratulations on your new appointment, and I hope you are very successful there as well, and maybe we could poach you back sometime. So, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Saray. And everyone's said some lovely words and really well meant. So I now determine the local law reapplied. Confirmation of minutes. Is there a move and second to confirm the minutes of the council meeting held on Tuesday the 20th of March? Moved by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Flannery. Is there any dissent on that? That is carried. I'll move to declarations of interest. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest or personal interest they wish to declare? I do. Items 6.1, 6.5 and 6.11. They're direct conflicts for the reasons I've informed the CEO about. Councillor Stapleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Items 6.1, 6.5 and 6.11, and they're indirect conflicts of interest that I notified the acting CEO earlier.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Saray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the recommendation of 6.6, will you be talking about advocacy? And I'm a candidate for the state election, so therefore I have a conflict. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Saray. Any other councillors have a conflict they wish to declare? I'll now move to officers' reports to be withdrawn for discussion. I will be withdrawing 6.2, the draft Casey Green Western Port Green Wedge Management Plan, and 6.6, the council assets on non-council land. Councillor Aziz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be withdrawing items 6.1 and 6.11. And can I respectfully suggest, Mr. Mayor, that I move that items 6.1, 6.5 and 6.11 be dealt with in sequence as the first order of business to allow you to depart given your conflict.
Thank you. We have a seconder for that. Councillor Jackson, is there any dissent on that? So we only have the room once. Thank you very much. That is carried. Councillor Stapleton, officers' reports.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 6.3, a solar panel partnership opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Cristani.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.4, I'd like to withdraw. Thank you.
6.4. Councillor Jackson.
6.5, Mr. Mayor.
6.5. Are there any other councillors wishing to withdraw items for further discussion? And is there a mover and seconder to adopt the recommendations listed in the officers' reports that have not been withdrawn for discussion as follows? We have 6.7, 6.8, 6.9 and 6.10. We have a mover for that. Councillor Flannery, seconded by Councillor Aziz. Is there any dissent on that? Then that is carried. We'll now move to public question time. Are there any public questions tonight? No public questions tonight. Officers' reports withdrawn for discussion. And 6.1, we're going in sequence, 6.1, 6.5, 6.11. So I will ask for a mover to chair the meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to nominate the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Wayne Smith, to chair the meeting.
Not moved by Councillor Aziz, seconded by Councillor Jackson. Any dissent? Then I'll hand over to Councillor Smith, who will deal with items 6.1, 6.5 and 6.11 in sequence. Thank you.
Okay. So who pulled out? Councillor Aziz, you...
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'd like to move the alternate recommendation before you on the screen in my name, and I'll just provide, hopefully through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, a couple of minutes for my colleagues to digest what's above there.
Okay. Is that the... Can you confirm that that's the alternate?
When I can see it. If you could just proceed down the page, please. Yep, that's the one.
You happy with that? So do we have a seconder?
Can I just read the...
Oh, sorry, yes. No, I should have given you more time.
Item 3, yeah.
Councillor Jackson indicated you want a second. Thank you. Councillor Aziz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor. As you're all aware, councillors, this matter came up before our meeting at the previous time in March, and it was deferred to allow for a briefing of councillors to take place and for some digestion of certain issues to be made, which were raised in pre-council generally, but also through discussions with the officers and the councillors. So I'm moving this amended recommendation tonight following the information that was presented at the briefing and also following...
Sorry, Councillor Aziz, we've lost a quorum.
No, we didn't.
Well, okay, sorry. Apologies.
Thank you. And so tonight I'm moving this alternate motion or alternate recommendation following some reflection on the material that we've had before us and also some expert material that we've obtained. So there are 3 critical issues in this, and I'll summarise them because there's already been a lot of discussion amongst councillors. And they are the issue of the width of the road reserve and whether it should be 31 metres or 25.5 metres. They're also to do with the supply of open space of approximately 6 metres in width by the length of the development in question. And the last issue as to whether the denial of those two would actually impact on the quality of the rugby field that we have out there. And the answer to the last issue is absolutely not, because with a length of 25.5 metres and also the deletion of the 6 metres open space, which by the way was an optional issue or an optional recommendation under the precinct structure plan, the rugby field retains its full integrity as a state-of-the-art rugby field, and I'll tell you why. We've been able to glean that there is a rugby field in the state of Victoria which is regarded by the sports governing body as state-of-the-art, as basically best practice, and that happens to be 10 metres less in width than what's going to be provided at Casey Fields, even without that 6 metre buffer. I've asked that we upload an image of that field on the screen, so I'm hoping that we can retrieve it now. And that's basically the rugby field in question, and as you can see, it's showing a width of around 81 metres, whereas ours will be 91 metres. The other interesting issue is that any ball that is kicked out into that particular rugby field, which is not in the city of Casey, is actually lands in a drain, whereas in our situation there is no drain, so it's certainly a lot neater. The other issue that came into discussion as to whether, given that this rugby field belongs to a different code and our field has a kick-to-touch requirement, as to whether that has any bearing. But again, expert opinion has obtained, which I'm now going to table at that meeting, which shows that the rule is exactly the same in both codes. So there is absolutely no effect whatsoever that we're talking about two different codes. And the credentials for the person that has provided this response, and you're about to see it, is the fact that he's actually an accredited exercise physiologist and an exercise scientist. So he certainly has done a lot of work in rugby as a game, and he understands the rules exceptionally well. So if I could ask Councillor Cristani to distribute this to our colleagues and also to the executive. And so what we have here is a situation, Mr. Deputy Mayor, where we can proceed with a quality development that is going to offer both relief in terms of land supply issues that the whole of the city of Casey is experiencing, as well as jobs ongoing in the creation and the maintenance of the development, while at the same time maintaining the quality of Casey Fields as a premier sporting facility for the state of Victoria. I've asked for a further document to be loaded, and that is that is the documentation from the governing body of the sport. So if I could just get the first page up on that. And so the Victorian Rugby Facilities Development Plan is the plan that points to this rugby field, whose aerial photograph that we've all just observed. And there is a description in that plan talking about this particular facility, as I said, as a state-of-the-art facility in the state of Victoria, and we're actually exceeding it by about 10 metres. Councillors, there's also been a further expert report produced, and again I table this today, in relation to an assessment on the Casey Fields Tan Track or fitness trail.
Councillor Ziz, you've got about 30 seconds.
I'll ask for a 2-minute extension, please.
Moved Councillor Rosario, seconded Councillor Jackson. Thank you.
Yep. And so this particular report, Mr. Deputy Mayor, was undertaken by ASR Research, and again points to the feasibility of the containment of the fitness track or the Tan Track inside the boundary of Casey Fields, which just by the way, councillors, was always designated as such on the master plan up until our council meeting a couple of weeks ago. And so it's a useful assessment to have, because we know that we won't impact by moving this amendment tonight, or alternate recommendation, on the continuity of that field right around the facility of Casey Fields, and more importantly, we won't impact on the quality of the rugby field by having that track contained within the boundaries of Casey Fields. So the documentary evidence is before us. It is the right motion. It is a motion that sends a very clear message to the community at large that this council is very prepared to achieve planning outcomes based on a balanced approach rather than on a purist understanding of what could and can't be in relation to planning matters. And it is also an amendment that will facilitate the badly needed release of land in the city of Casey, given the pressures currently on land supply, and also create jobs in the process, which this city is screaming for, given our trajectory of growth currently occurring at 10,000 residents a year, and where Casey is set to exceed the entire population of Tasmania in under 20 years. Mr Deputy Mayor, I commend the motion to the Chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Aziz. I'll just ask if there's any dissent to start with. There being no dissent, I declare that motion carried. The alternative motion. Thank you, Councillor Aziz. 6.5, which was Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Mr Deputy Mayor, I move this in my name.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Flannery.
Mr Deputy Mayor, I've purely moved this for the purposes of the conflict that was declared, so I have nothing further to say in the matter.
Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, I'll declare it carried. Item 6.11.
6.11, Mr Deputy Mayor. I'm moving an alternate recommendation in relation to this.
Okay.
So this is the alternate recommendation that I'm proposing, and it argues for a 3-week exhibition period rather than 3 weeks to give the community more time to consider the master plan, and that it be presented to a future council meeting for consideration of the submissions received. So again, I
should have asked for a seconder earlier. Councillor Flannery, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's fairly self-explanatory, Mr Deputy Mayor, so I'm happy to rest on that.
I'll ask if there's any dissent. Being no dissent, that motion is carried. And we can ask our 3 councillors to return.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. We'll resume the meeting with item 6.2, but before I do so, I know a lot of people were invited tonight by officers to listen to those items, so might move a 1-minute adjournment of the meetings to allow people who came along for those items to leave if they choose to do so. Seconded by Councillor Smith. Any dissent? We'll have a 1-minute adjournment while people may leave if they wish to. Thank you. Right, thanks, councillors. We want to take seats and resume our meeting. Next item is item 6.2, and I've moved that myself, and I'll move that in my name. Seconded by Councillor Stapleton. Thank you. I just wish to talk about the draft Casey's Western Port Greenwedge Management Plan. Went out on exhibition and we'll be coming back in June with around about June with a plan. This report provides information and submissions received by Council in response to the exhibition of the Casey Western Port Greenwedge Management Plan. Over 260 submissions were received from Greenwedge residents, parties, MPs, service authorities and the state government. Submissions indicate there is a strong preference for further subdivision in the rural areas of Cranbourne South down to 1 hectare and around the Pearsdale area to 2 hectares on the basis that it would assist residents to better maintain their properties, allow for provision of more trees and to maintain the rural and agricultural character of the area, and also creating opportunities for the equine and greyhound industry and people who enjoy that type of lifestyle. There were conversely some submissions lodged by residents of Pearsdale Township and particularly Turin, coastal villages who don't want to see any intense subdivision in the Green Wedge, and I can understand that. Everyone I've spoken to is not in favour of intense subdivision. In fact, the perception of some people was it would end up with houses where their spoutings were touching, and that was never the intent that we've had, and I've waylaid those fears. That's something I certainly wouldn't support. We have an urban growth zone in Clyde, which is growing at 100% a year, and some of those houses are very, very close. That's not a rural character. That's not certainly what we're looking for in the final plan. It's a good balancing act of recognising what the land is used for and continuing in those uses. We also realise the large amount of land that is under agricultural or crop growing at the moment, and I spent 2 hours driving around yesterday in the area, really double checking all the crops that are grown over the thousands of acres of land that we're looking at, and also in talking to locals who, with the land use of equine, I know around Pearsdale it's 10 acres, and it says here in the report that many would like 5 acres. Horses, I guess, are different to cattle. You can have, as seen at Cranbourne Racetrack and Pakenham Racetrack, you can have stabled horses 60 on a 2 acre block. So, and many are trained that way. So it would enable people to improve our equine industry, and also with Caulfield closing its doors with 600 racehorses looking for homes. Some will hopefully go to the Cranbourne Racing Centre under trainers there, but many will be looking for areas around the Cranbourne Training Complex on 5 acre lots to house 40 or 50 horses in paddocks and have paddocks they can exercise with, etc., etc. So that they are the types of things that we'll be looking at, but and working with DWOP. They've said they wouldn't be in favour of township boundaries. That doesn't concern me. We're looking at the land around those towns already as being keeping their rural character, and that's what the people want. And so we've had public meetings, we've had lots of submissions. This has gone on a long time. I think I want to congratulate the officers for the work that they have put in, and I'm looking forward to working with the officers on formulating the final copy coming out in June that doesn't see huge amounts of changes in land use to dispel people who may want to think that crops will all of a sudden become houses. It's not going to happen, because the government has made it quite clear that it is a growing area. It's one of the biggest areas for equine and greyhounds and people who work there. To have zero growth, we have moved to some measured development, very minor compared to other areas, because it's not what the people want, and you wouldn't see a lot of change to what's already there now in some of those blocks, and in talking to the officers. And this is what I saw when I drove around, and I've been talking to many, many residents in that area. So I want to dispel any theory that Pearsdale and Turin is a different type of town, because it's a very quiet village, coastal village, where Pearsdale is more of an activity centre town, where Turin, and we have many meetings down there with the business group where we want to, and we're spending $850,000 on the Main Street very, very soon to attract people to the businesses there to have a look around at the absolute magnificent what the coastal villages have to offer, and we don't want to alter that. I want to make that quite clear. And in Pearsdale, if you drive at the back of the shops there are 5-acre blocks around with horses on them and trainers, equestrian centres all over the place, and we don't want to change that either. So we think that we have absorbed all of the submissions that have come in, and I think we're working towards something that's going to be pretty much palatable to the majority of people, not only to satisfy everybody, but if you have zero growth, then you become a ghost town. Turin and Pearsdale grow at about 12% a year. As I said, Clyde's growing at about 100% a year. So we want to maintain that 12%, whether it's more, the businesses are doing better, and I went to 6 businesses in Pearsdale, and they all said they're struggling and that they needed some more people, but in a measured way to make their businesses sustainable. So that I've taken that on board as well. And my time's up. I'll finish on that and I'll move it in my name. Is there any dissent on that matter? Then that is carried. Thank you very much. 6.3, Councillor Stapleton, a solar power partnership opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move this recommendation in my name with a slight amendment to the first paragraph, please. Just having a think about words time availability, if we could put a comma after availability with, and we've put the wording with an opportunity to meet when Joshua next visits Victoria. Full stop. Thank you. Mr Mayor, I move this notice of motion. Oh, I need a seconder, don't I?
Yep. I'll move it. Second.
Thank you. Thank you. I moved this notice of motion last year because of some information that I'd been given in terms of a really exciting partnership opportunity, and it's not just a piecemeal opportunity, it's actually a holistic one that could cover the whole of our city, and it could also benefit not only council, which is definitely what we're aiming to achieve, but also with the community. There are opportunities to benefit the community as well. Primarily, this organisation have actually been looking at projects like up in the Northern Territory where there's lots of land. They've been actually doing a lot of projects that are benefiting the Aboriginal community up there. They also help a lot of Indigenous communities throughout the world with their projects, but they're now looking more to cities and looking at the creative way that they can approach this at a holistic level. So getting an appointment with Joshua has been very hard because he's been travelling around the world. However, he is going to be here in Australia in the next couple of months. I've been assured of that. He does require some information from council officers, so if I could just pass that on to Ms Ward, just to be able to send him some information so he can do his homework before he comes out here. We've certainly got a lot of information about what he does, and I think it's a really good opportunity, too good to be passed up when he comes to visit here in Melbourne. A couple of talking points that I'd like to share with the gallery and with the council, and that is that the City of Casey, through successive council terms, have an ongoing commitment to sustainability and an inspirational goal to achieve carbon neutrality. Casey has positioned itself as a leader in greenhouse gas emissions and energy mitigation, and its best practice approach to reducing emissions, energy use and costs, and has invested substantially in solar technology and energy efficiency to successfully meet its emissions target and significantly reduce energy costs. By the end of the 2017-2018 financial year, City of Casey will have delivered 600 kilowatts of solar energy projects in Casey. Since Council's notice of motion, which was mine in October 2017, Council officers have engaged with a new and existing player or players in the energy market on solar opportunities. This is via contacts made in Smart City Networks and Energy Sector Networks, long-standing engagement and relationships with SECA, Southeast Climate Change Alliance, and affiliated climate change and emissions management networks, other government, and other local governments, and through discussions with developers. Large-scale solar investment is an excellent opportunity for the City of Casey and its residents, and Casey plans to build on local partnership funding models as part of its new emissions management plan in 2018 to 2023. Solar technology's rapid growth is fostering new partnership and funding opportunities for jobs and investment for the city. Public-private partnerships could support larger capital works projects for Casey, with costs shared by parties, and opportunities could be aligned to Council's strategic objectives and goals to identify projects that could provide revenue streams for Council and could also support Council in becoming carbon neutral, which would be fantastic, and more broadly improve the financial resilience of the city. So there's some great work being done, and I had a meeting with Ms Ward and the officers recently, and it was great to hear about the good things that are being done. I still would like to explore this opportunity. It's not pushing a particular company, but it is pushing a concept. I think a whole of city approach would be something really wonderful, and if we could get a win-win for, of course, the organisation, but for Council and for the residents of the City of Casey, I'd be really happy with that outcome. That would be fantastic indeed. So I just seek my fellow councillors' support on this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Stable. Any questions or dissent? Question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Stapleton. I think it's great to see this, and it sort of highlights, I know, some stuff we're doing in the smart city space as well, and potentially just a question to Ms Curtin in relation to this, and Ms Ward, whether in relation to the report that's coming back, whether anything can be incorporated with our developed smart city strategy as well, because I know the solar would fit very well within that, and things that we've already been looking at and meetings we've been having now.
Ms Ward?
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. A lot of the work when we did the early planning for smart cities and included the carbon neutral side of things and the emissions management side of things, the work that's being done through procurement is consistent with that. So we're all aligned and making sure it ticks a lot of boxes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions or any dissent? None, and that is carried. Thank you, Councillor Stapleton. We'll move to 6.4, Community Sports Infrastructure Fund. Councillor Cristani.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move this Wait till it comes up. I'd like to move the recommendation associated with item 6.4 in my name.
I'll second it.
Thanks, Mr Mayor and fellow sports portfolio holder. The Community Sports Infrastructure Fund is a state government funding program. The City of Casey has enjoyed a strong relationship with the state government funding program, having successfully obtained funding over many years and anticipating further opportunities in the future. Council submitted 6 projects to the full application stage of the program, with 5 applications being successful. Funding of just under $1 million has been awarded across the 5 projects. Feedback received from state government officers indicated that City of Casey's applications were strong and stood out amongst those received. The funding awarded through the programs will assist Council to deliver improved health and wellbeing outcomes through increased participation in sport and recreation, with improved infrastructure to be accessible to a diverse range of community members. Mr Mayor, might add, I'm very pleased to see it spread across Casey, these funding commitments, and I'm happy to say 2 of them were in the 4 Oaks ward. So
I didn't get any.
You didn't.
No.
So it wasn't evenly spread, but we've got more population in 4 Oaks. I won't go into debate with you. But thank you. I just put that to my fellow councillors. I'm thankful that we've been a successful 5 out of 6 rate is a high success rate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cristani. Any questions or dissent on that matter? And that is carried. Thank you. We'll move now to 6.5, Brompton. No, we've done that once. 6.6, which is me. Council assets on non-council land. I'd like to move that recommendation in my name.
Sorry, Mr Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Stapleton.
I'm sorry, Mr Mayor.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I
Conflict
have to declare a conflict of interest because I'm a candidate at the state election. You'll be talking about advocacy to ministers.
Thank you. We'll call you back in when we're finished. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'm in agreement with the report that we do have a lot of facilities, and we are looking at building facilities on land that we don't own, such as DWALP or Parks Victoria, And I'd like to report in looking at services provided to the community that have a community benefit. Is it? Just flick it off for you. And we will continue to do that. And in the report, it talks about when we build something or support something on land that we don't own, that it does have a huge community benefit. We did have a chat a little while ago about what we would fund on land we don't own due to rate capping. And because of the rate capping, I did want to put in something here that we develop an advocacy program with DWALP and relevant state government ministers to assist with funding or part funding for projects that have maximum community benefit on the land that we don't own, because as we know with rate capping, as we move forward, we have a $6 million gap this year in capital works, $12 million the year after and $20 million the year after that, and climbing dramatically the year after that. It is a state government policy, rate capping, so to make the state government, any state government, whether it be any major party, to make their policies work in growth councils like ours, you have to fund or co-fund part of those capital works, particularly on land that you own, to make your policy work and take the pressure off the residents of Casey, so that we can try to keep up the infrastructure that's needed with 150 people moving in per week. So this is about developing an advocacy program, teamwork with the landowners, either state, DWAP or Parks Victoria, so that we can have talks, build a relationship and try to get them to put more funding into these places, whereas before, traditionally, we have been funding pretty much the majority of them. And unfortunately, we're coming to a stage where we have to make a decision on whether we spend money on land that we don't own, or we ask the state government to build that infrastructure that's needed, because they own the land and they have a role to play as well in looking after the people of Casey. Is there any questions or dissent on that matter? Then that is carried. Thank you. Councillor Saray, can she come back in, please? We continue on. While Councillor Saray makes her way back in, I think we can continue on. Consideration of reports of committees. Is there a mover and seconder to receive and note the record of Assembly of Councillors as listed in the agenda? Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Stapleton. Any dissent? That is carried. Are there any petitions tonight? I don't think Councillor Saray had a petition, did she? No? Okay. Notices of motion, and I believe 3217 and 3218 are no longer relevant, and Councillor Cristani will give us a brief explanation as to why they're not going to be spoken about.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do withdraw my motion. I'm pleased to do so purely because the Charities Amendment has been ruled unconstitutional by the Parliamentary President, the State Parliament President. What the motion I proposed sought to achieve was the grave concerns of what was effectively an attack on the very fabric of our society, and had the audacity, I believe, to defy faith itself. This was a wolf in sheep's clothing, Mr. Mayor, and the spirit driving this sought to destroy our very Judeo-Christian roots and the freedom of religion as well. I hope I could showcase just how much of our faith communities serve our residents. I did forget to add Hatch, Match and Dispatch, unfortunately, on my list. On a more serious note, should another horrific version of the Charities Amendment rear its ugly head, and although...
Thanks, Councillor Cristani, just point of order. You're explaining why this isn't being presented. You're actually debating.
Sorry, yeah. I just wanted to say I will likely address this in future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. 3219, Councillor Cristani, Crime Chat mobile app.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to... I've just got to find... because I've locked out of my computer, so I've just tried to find my notes. Okay. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move this in my name.
We have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rosario.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rosario. I met Darian and Carissa last week. They contacted me a few weeks ago. I've finally been able to catch up with them, and so I was very pleased to meet this sister and brother pair. Exceptional two people. Darian, he's 23. He has 2 degrees in commerce and law, and Carissa is celebrating her 21st birthday today. So happy birthday, Carissa. They're very innovative, and they've invented a crime chat app. I just want to give a little bit of background on this too, but they'll actually talk more, should this motion pass, they'll talk more when they present. 13 years ago, they migrated from South Africa, and security has been obviously in the headlines lately around that nation, and truly has never left the headlines for decades. Life for Darian and Carissa can be described as quite tense growing up in South Africa. It's always been a relevant issue there of security. They've had security cars, guard dogs, high fences, were just the norm of everyday life that they grew up in. And they said where politicians live, they had barbed wire fences. Can you imagine, Mr Mayor, we having to have barbed wire fences? They had friends held at knife point. They had a family member who was tied up when he was closing his business, and they stole his money, opened his safe, that sort of stuff that goes on. Those scenarios, those stories, and what they lived with impacted the way they saw life in Australia. That they want to protect Australia from ever this sort of thing happening. So they actually presented such a good presentation on this, and I'm looking forward to perhaps hearing what they have to say and how they can best reduce crime as they see in Casey. They developed this crime chat app, and I believe it actually supersedes what any other social media platform presents, and I think it would be to see what they do present. They do know what the crime stats are, and we would obviously like to see a reduction in this. Obviously, we aim to make this the place to live, work and raise a family, as well as the current, to make it most livable city, and this will be along that stream. So I present this to the Chamber. I'd love to have you support having them come to the next general purpose meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cristani. Can I ask you, it's the 10th of April. It may be very difficult to alter things for officers to chase them up and do it. Would you entertain the next available general purposes?
Thank you. Do we have advice that it's too soon, Mr Mayor?
Through you, Mr Mayor, my understanding is that there's already items scheduled for the next general purposes.
Sure.
So I advise the Mayor maybe to suggest that we change to the next available.
Sure. If I have leave of council, can I mention...
We'll do the words and then we'll ask for leave.
Yeah. Okay, so the May general purpose meeting?
Next available, I think.
I said that once and I haven't, sometimes it was months, so can we suggest May? I'll
just give you, I'll have to ask the officers, I don't know what the backlog is.
April or...
No.
Well, April was ruled out.
April's
so
May.
Okay, May or next
May.
available. We'll just leave it at next available. That's
The
fine.
May general purposes meeting.
Obviously, the sooner the better, because crime has not been fully reduced. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Jackson.
I was just going to suggest some wording, Mr Mayor, in relation to being invited to the next Casey Council, the next, so I say to present at the, it should say, I think to present at the next available general purpose meeting.
That's right, thanks.
I'm trying to get Councillor Cristani in by no later than the last meeting in May. So at least if one comes beforehand, Councillor Cristani, then you can be slotted in.
That's okay, thank you. I want to leave it in the discretion of officers' hands, because if there's only the one meeting in May, so, but I appreciate that.
But she doesn't want it. So,
no later.
so you're happy to leave it as it is? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, remove the last line.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, because I really want this to happen sooner. The sooner this actually gets promoted, the better. Thanks.
We'll get there. Councillor Flannery.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just unaware, Councillor Castani, I see that you've got up there as a crime chat. Is Council aware, or you're aware, that we have a Casey webpage, crime page, and you know that seems to be getting around the whole of City of Casey. Everybody seems to be on it. I actually reported a stolen car in Berwick on the weekend, and everybody started making comments about it. And the thing is that the word gets around the City of Casey with that crime page. Everybody's on it every 5 minutes looking at it and making comments, and I think that's a great page, and maybe they need to, I'd love to hear what they have to say, but also get them involved with the Casey crime page, because I think it's a magnificent page for keeping up with what's happening within our city.
Thank you, Mr Flannery. If I may say through the chair, I believe it's not actually our crime page. Am I right in saying that? Okay, it's actually just a community crime, not just, but, and has that stolen car been retrieved yet, Councillor Flannery? I'll leave that for a minute.
I'll give it back.
I would just say, and it is a serious matter, of course. I will say that they are aware of it, and they're aware of all their competitors, and basically what they want to remove is the chatter that goes on and just get to the facts. They also have a significant part of this app where you can alert those who you want immediately should you be in trouble, and it actually has applications that attach. I don't want to steal their thunder, so, but they're aware, and I asked some very tough questions about how much do we really want to share publicly. I know that they'd be open to hear about all the tough questions, so I'd love to have your support. Thanks.
Councillor Rosario.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Council's aware that I rise to support this. I think it's actually a great idea, in using technology and whatever we can to help curb crime is something we need to explore. Now, I've got a question for the officers, though, Mr Mayor, because about 3 weeks ago, because Darren and Carissa reached out to a number of councillors, I asked the acting manager for Safer Communities, Daniel Osborne at the time, to look into this, and they were reaching out to Darren. I'm just wondering if we had any responses to that, because that will feed into what Councillor Cristani is also proposing to learn more about.
Mr Colden?
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, I need to take that on notice.
All right, well, if we could get some information on that at the, to Councillor Cristani as well. Let's find out what's happening. They've had a few weeks to do that, plus in addition to what Councillor Cristani is doing, I think will be really good to help piece together the puzzle for us to understand this better.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If I may respond to that. Thank you, councillors. I really appreciate your support. Yes, I am aware that they had contacted, I believe, Nick, who was also on our Community Safety Committee, and so I'm glad that they've been able to contact other councillors as well. So this will actually bring them to collaborate. I actually got them in contact also with Stephen Archibald, who is on our committee, on his work, if you recall, about the Narrewara North Street, that they were hit, a number of houses were hit. This brings a digital element for communication. So sorry to go off the subject, but yes, thank you. They're connected.
Thank you, Councillor Cristani. I just want to double check with everyone. Did I get leave of council to make those changes? Good. Any dissent on that? Then that is carried. Councillor Stapleton, Marinda Park Learning and Community Centre, Community Space.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the alternate notice of motion wording in front of you, my fellow councillors, not in the agenda, just slightly amended so that we can do some... it's not quite what I said through, I don't think. We just need a break between... We need that broken up into 2 paragraphs, if we could. Yep, thank you. Right. Yep, that's it. Yes, I'd like to move that in my name, thank you.
Just give people a chance to read. I'll second by Councillor Rowe.
Yep.
Does anyone need more time?
Right to go?
Yeah, good to go.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, fellow councillors. I've spoken about Marinda Park on many occasions. This is an enormous centre, and I mean enormous in numbers, not so much in size. It's a fabulous centre. It's recently had a refurb, but the problem is they haven't got any additional rooms and they desperately need them. I turned up a couple of weeks ago to Marinda Park, it was about 8 o'clock at night, and it was chock-a-block. Every classroom was full. The community space, as small as it is, was full, and there was nowhere else for anyone to be. And this is the same scenario during the daytime, bearing in mind that this centre not only operates there, they actually have satellite classes and learning schools that go into other centres as well. And councillors, you might remember that I actually raised an advocacy campaign for neighbourhood houses, because some houses are actually closing down because of their incapacity to meet the needs of the community because of their lack of funding and lack of available hours. This is where Marinda Park have been absolutely fantastic. They've actually been able to keep those centres up and running, meeting the needs of the community. And I think one of the places that I'm thinking about is Launching Place, and down past Lakes Entrance, I've forgotten the name of the place, but it's Patterson Lakes, around that way. So there's a number of centres, including Pakenham, that they've been able to do all of this, and not that Pakenham was planning to close, but certainly the other ones were. So what Marinda Park does is something quite extraordinary. They not only do that, they have great childcare, they have school holiday programs. They've also got a VCAL centre, 2 portables that sit side by side that they purchase themselves with the permission of council to put it on our land, and they project manage the whole of the delivery of those 2 portables. It was something quite extraordinary to see. Put them together and built a bridge in between the 2 of them, and you would really find it hard to know that they were actually 2 separate portables. They're fantastic, and they're operating very well for young kids who fall between the gaps at school, and they are either given enough opportunity to actually re-engage in the school system, or they go on to get jobs. And I was there the other night with Councillor Rowe, and it was the awards night. And there were people that have undertaken courses there that are going straight into jobs, and some have got jobs before they complete their course. And I don't know any other centre that do this so well. So to get to my point, they need a community space. They don't have enough room. They've had inquiries from Vic Roads who want to hire out their part of their facility, and they haven't got the room for them. We've got another organisation who do great things for vulnerable people in our community. They can't give them a spot. So they actually need a community space, and a portable is going to be it until we get our master plan across the line, which will probably be in about a couple of years' time, I think. And we can decide how we're going to move forward with the facility in terms of the infrastructure. So a community space that council will provide the funding for, but Marinda Park have actually kindly offered to project manage it. And when I've compared the costing, we could save $100,000, which actually could go into the Mayfield community, and by golly, we've got enough projects for that to be able to be absorbed. So to my fellow councillors, I ask for your support, and I thank the officers for working with me on this, because I think it's a tried and true process that Marinda Park have proven that they can project manage something quite complex, 2 portables at a time. I think they can handle 1. So it's very good of them to offer, and I look forward to getting a date when we can move forward with this after the budget is approved. So thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stapleton. Is there any questions or dissent on the matter? That is carried. Thank you. We'll move along to urgent business, and Councillor Aziz, there is a crisis in housing options, and that means it's urgent, I reckon.
That's right, thank you. I'd like to move that it's urgent on the basis that the motions I'm proposing will explore avenues for improving housing options and affordability in the City of Casey.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Is there any dissent that it's admitted into urgent business? Then it's admitted.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll move the 2 motions together, and again I ask that my colleagues be given a couple of minutes to digest what they are.
Councillors, I've just been asked, is that exactly what you wanted put up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I have the last point before the second point? And then the last point should say that 2 separate reports. Two separate reports come back.
Councillor Aziz.
Yeah.
Seconded by Councillor Flannery.
Mr Mayor, I had an amazing opportunity last week to meet with a developer who currently doesn't operate in Casey but operates out in the Werribee area. And obviously Casey is becoming a city of quite some reputation, and so he met with me as a former mayor, and I started talking to him about some of the opportunities and challenges we have in our city, and then he presented me with a couple of interesting models that he's actually deployed through his company around the Werribee area. The first model is interesting because it talks about you know, how we have a house and land package. Well, this is actually a farm and land package, or a house and farm package. And what it is, Mr Mayor, are substantial pieces of land that they've developed in that part of the world for farming purposes, and they've placed impressive homesteads on them and have turned them into not only agricultural production, but also places of tourism interest, because they've also created, in some aspects, distilleries as well as wineries, as well as a range of other tourist type primary production. And those types of farms have then attracted overseas investors to actually come and purchase them as a business and inject money into the local economy, which taps into very neatly, Mr Mayor, the model we have about international engagement and attracting foreign investment into the city of Casey to create jobs and stimulate economic activity. And so that's one set of projects that his company is working on. The other project that he's working on, completely on the other end of the scale, is the provision of what he calls intermittent housing, which is short-term accommodation or short-term housing available for crisis purposes. And he's actually teamed up with the Salvation Army to provide that type of infrastructure in the Werribee area, and it's been working very well. And all of the products that he's developed, again, in that neck of the woods, is fully utilised and booked out months in advance. So we need that type of affordable housing in the city of Casey, Mr Mayor. He doesn't call it emergency accommodation because that throws up a whole heap of negative connotations, and we've experienced the community's feedback in relation to this in the past with state government provided housing. What they have is a much neater model, working with a reputable organisation like the Salvation Army to deliver something that fits into the local area without actually taking away from the amenity or the planning of a suburb, and yet fulfilling the purpose for which it was built. And so two exciting concepts that are badly needed, and certainly in relation to the former, with the farming package, our green wedge areas are areas that we may be able to look at that are very hard to develop and subdivide at the moment, but may be perfect for that scale, because we're talking about 100 acres at a time. So it's an exciting prospect, and I've been having discussions with our officers in relation to how we can take it further, because as you know, Mr Mayor, I'm highly focused on jobs.
Excuse me, Councillor Smith. Councillor Aziz has the floor.
I'm highly focused on jobs and on developing our city to its full potential and creating local employment opportunities for every 7 out of every 10 Casey residents that has to leave the city of Casey to go to work somewhere else. By the end of this council term, I have this lofty ambition of actually inversing that proportion. I'd like 7 to stay and only 3 go out to go to work. I know it's probably more ambitious than realistic, but we always aim for those higher aspirations anyway, because unless you aim that high, you simply don't go anywhere. So I look forward to the reports coming back and of council being engaged yet again in these exciting prospects and delivering once more for our residents.
Thank you, Councillor Aziz. Are you aware?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Aziz, when I come back from, or when I was over in Israel, you talk about what's happening in Werribee with the home and farm package. That was actually discussed in Ofricam when I was over there, that they want to sell land and farming opportunities to the people that are moving in Ofricam to get more people down there and to grow their vegetation. So that plan there is a great idea, and as I said, maybe that we might be able to talk to somebody in Ofricam and see how they're doing it. That's if it interests you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Stabile.
Just a question, Mr Mayor, and then just if I could just make a couple of comments. We could call that the Casey kibbutz. So, Mr Mayor, I commend Councillor Aziz on this. This is an outstanding a topic to look at, and it's probably not as separate as you think. It could come together very well. Councillor Ablett and I have been working on a container project with a gentleman from Lyndhurst. He's been down to see the Minister for Housing, and he's absolutely stoked with the concept. And it comes, I know the officers are all going to faint because of the word container, but it comes down to architecture. It comes down to the way that you put the pieces together, the way that you make them look aesthetically, and the way that you design them for livability. And the concepts that this young gentleman have are nothing short of extraordinary. I went to the Tiny House Forum a couple of weeks ago at the MAV, and they talked about a number of things, and one of them was around a very similar project to what you're talking about with the farming on smaller land, but it was all centralised around a huge big community garden, which I thought was very good. This concept is just an illustration of how there can be different models and different opportunities, and I really commend you for this item of urgent business, Councillor Aziz. Great idea, and love to get behind it.
Thank you, Councillor Stapleton. Yes, I want to congratulate you, Councillor Aziz, on coming up with this. We always looking to think outside the square and how we can work with other levels of government as well in coming up with something great for housing. I don't know about you, but I get approached a lot by people saying, what are you doing for the homeless? What are you doing? So anything we can do here. I certainly look forward to both reports coming back and jumping on board at the meetings that would follow that. So fully support and congratulate you on your economic thinking, not just on this, but in the whole portfolio. Well done. Is there any dissent on the matter?
Mr. Mayor, can I make a further comment?
Yep.
I think I'm grateful to your indulgence for allowing me to move the two together, because it allows us to basically look at both ends of the spectrum: emergency housing or intermittent housing, but also those large investment attraction projects, particularly as Councillor Smith and I prepare to make our way to China in 2 days' time, because that's the sort of product that the Chinese market craves. I know that a lot of the take-up in the Werribee area has been through foreign investment, through the Chinese market, and particularly through the significant investor visa program, where you're looking at minimum investments at a time of around $5 million. So our city has to have the capacity to think along both ends of the spectrum and to deliver innovative solutions like this wherever we can find them. Now, there's a lot of work before we get there, but we've got to embark on a plan now, because the housing affordability crisis will only get worse, and our need and craving for jobs will continue to accelerate as the city grows residentially, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Aziz. Again, it's really exciting stuff. It really is. And Councillor Flannery sent it in Israel, and Councillor Stapleton. So I think there's a lot to be achieved out of it, and it is a major issue, and I thank you for your passion in dealing with it. Is there any dissent on the matter? And that is carried. Thank you. Councillor Saray, you spoke about an unsafe parking situation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does the officers have my motion?
Just tell us why it's important, why it's urgent.
It's important because of the safety.
Sorry, urgent, sorry.
Sorry.
It's urgent because, sorry.
Of safety, safety concerns.
Yeah. Because of safety reasons, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, is there any dissent? Moved by Councillor Saray, seconded by Councillor Jackson. Is there any dissent that it be admitted to urgent business? No, it's carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's pretty self-explanatory about some parking issues on Gloucester Avenue. It's a very narrow road with all the businesses on that side, as well as St Margaret's College, and when it was...
Sorry, Councillor Saray, my mistake.
Sorry.
Moved by Councillor Saray, seconded by Councillor Jackson.
Thank you.
You may continue. Thank you.
And when St John of God was there, that was also quite busy, which they will be doing a redevelopment there at the moment. So it will always be a busy road with all the people walking towards the station. There's also a couple of aged care facilities on that road. So it's quite a busy road that has a lot of different needs for lots of different people. So with the businesses there, they want to maximise obviously their business, but this investigation will help that if we can look at the parking situation, because there are people parking from the station as well also on Gloucester Avenue for a very, very long time. So we do need to be looking at that and that whole area as well. But thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Saray. Councillor Aziz?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I guess I have to say, are you aware, because I fully support this, but are you aware that I'd like to commend Councillor Saray and Councillor Jackson for raising this matter? Every time I go and visit my dry cleaner on that street, he just won't shut up about it. And he's right, because you've got
Your suit looks very good too, by the way. Your suit looks...
Should I declare a conflict, Mr Mayor? a number of businesses along that area are small businesses, and they're trying to make a dollar. And the reality is a lot of the patronage down there relies on short-term parking to get in, drop off, and then leave again. But unfortunately, some people overstay their welcome. I believe the parking restrictions are for 1 hour at a time. And some people basically park their cars for 3 or 4 hours, and it's most unfair to the traders. So there's two elements to this motion. I just want to impress upon the officers this. The first element is investigating more dynamic parking arrangements on the street to allow that flow of traffic to occur more rapidly. But the second element is, until that occurs and council is furnished with a report as to what the options are, we've really got to go out there and undertake some enforcement activities, Mr Coldham, to make sure that even the existing parking restrictions or arrangements are actually enforced, because the traders are really screaming. They're losing business every day, and it's not fair on them that people just park there and, you know, go to their offices or whatever and just leave the cars there the whole day without any repercussions whatsoever. So if I could just impress that upon you, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aziz. Was there any dissent on the matter? And that is carried. Are there any other items of urgent business tonight? Can I please get a mover and seconder to move the council resolve itself into closed council and resume after a 5-minute adjournment? Moved by Councillor Stapleton, seconded by Councillor Flannery. Is there any dissent? That is carried. See you all in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Coffee time.
But I thought he was going to do it.